Welcome to the programme. David Cameron goes into the second ballot of Tory MPs today as the overwhelming favourite to succeed Michael Howard. The Shadow Education Secretary, who finished second in the first ballot, is widely expected to pick up the bulk of Kenneth Clarke's votes after he was eliminated on Tuesday. Jane Dougal has the latest from Westminster.
If the figures are anything to go by, they could spell the future of the Tory party. David Cameron is almost certain to go through on today's ballot of MPs, and according to the YouGov poll in today's Telegraph, he has the largest public support, therefore predicting he would win the leadership battle hands down. Out of 700 party members polled, 59% backed David Cameron, 18% said they would vote for Liam Fox, and just 15% supported David Davis. For the former frontrunner, third place makes for tough reading. Although gaining 62 votes in the first ballot, it's thought several will change allegiance to Cameron.
I think it's very difficult when you pledge to a candidate because you think there'll be, a great Prime Minister, which is, I think, what David Davis would be. But the key thing is obviously to win an election in order to do that. And for me, the main issue, as I told him, is winning the next general election. And I just think the Cameron campaign has far outstripped that of any of the other candidates.
And now Davis is also facing competition from the dark horse in this race, Liam Fox. He needs just 11 more votes to overtake him.
I mean, there's been no sign of that at all. I mean, what I say to them actually is, if you're a centre-right candidate, you want a centre-right candidate, you should be supporting the one who's going to win. I mean, it's 62 votes to 42. It's a pretty straightforward comparison.
I don't think anyone really understands what the true picture is. I think my colleagues are reflecting at the moment. They're looking at yesterday's result, trying to digest it.
If David Davis trails a poor second in today's ballot, pressure may be on him to stand aside. He said he wouldn't do that because he wants to continue competing in this exciting leadership race. Jane Diggle, ITV News.
Well, our reporter Jane Dougal is at Westminster. Well, Jane, it looks like it's going to be a tight finish today.
Yes, very tight indeed. Just one vote could make all the difference today, and it looks like that battle is going to be for second place. Now, I'm not saying that it's a foregone conclusion that David Cameron could win the ballot, but at the moment it certainly looks like he could do, because the majority of Ken Clarke supporters have now turned their allegiance to him. As for second place, that's going to be a tough battle between Liam Fox and David Davis. Now, in the last week or so, David Davis's campaign seems to have lost its momentum. And actually, all Liam Fox would have to do is to take 11 votes from him in order to overtake him. Now, there are rumours going around that if David Davis comes a poor second to Cameron, then he may just stand aside and allow Cameron to take the leadership. Obviously, David Davis has denied that he would do that. However, in the 2001 leadership battle, he did stand aside to allow Ian Duncan Smith to become the leader.
Well, Jane, it is quite incredible how the positions of candidates has changed so drastically since this race began.
It's fascinating, actually, isn't it? If you said to anyone about a month ago at the beginning of this campaign who they thought would be the two favourite contenders, I bet you they wouldn't have said Cameron and Fox. Now, the only worry with voting for Cameron is that the fact that he doesn't have a great deal of experience, and it could be a risk for MPs. If you remember, though, the reason why he became one of the favourites is because of that very rousing speech that he gave at the Blackpool conference. And unfortunately, at the same time, David Davis, who was the front runner at the time, gave quite a lacklustre one. Now, when MPs are voting today, as I said, they may be worried slightly about the risk that David Cameron may pose to them. And it's all very well coming out and publicly voicing your support for a candidate, but when you get into the privacy of your own voting booth, that's perhaps when any nagging doubts might creep into your mind. Now, it was worth remembering, however, that neither Gordon Brown or Tony Blair had any frontbench experience when they came to power, so that could be a plus for David Cameron. The voting is scheduled to finish at around 5 o'clock. The result will be live on the news channel at 5:30.
Exciting stuff, Jane Dougal at Westminster. Many thanks. Now, frantic efforts are underway to locate an Irish journalist kidnapped in Baghdad. Rory Carroll, who was covering the trial of Saddam Hussein for The Guardian, was taken at gunpoint in the Iraqi capital yesterday. Chris Shipp has the latest.
This is Sadr City in Baghdad, where yesterday The Guardian journalist was taken at gunpoint. It's thought Rory Carroll had been here watching the trial of Saddam Hussein with Iraqis on television. Sadr city is a sprawling Shiite neighbourhood in the Iraqi capital, known to be a stronghold for supporters of the radical cleric Muqtada al-Sadr.
In which case that would conclude the first trial, and then there would possibly be an appeals process after that if Saddam is found guilty.
This is Rory Carroll giving a recent television interview on the forthcoming trial of the former Iraqi dictator. The 33-year-old is an Irish citizen. He has worked in the city as The Guardian's Baghdad correspondent for the past 9 months. As recently as yesterday, he had filed for the newspaper. An article on the start of Saddam's hearing carries his byline. He was due to file again for the paper today. Rory's father, Joe Carroll, is the former North American correspondent for the Irish Times. He says he reluctantly accepted that his son was working in a dangerous city.
Well, he went out of his way, I think, to reassure us that, you know, he wasn't in danger, and he was in the hotel a lot, and then he had 2 drivers and he had 2 interpreters, so he himself used to play it down. But I mean, we kind of knew, you know, given the setup there, that there must be danger for all journalists working there.
Former colleagues from his former newspaper in Belfast have voiced their alarm at the news from Baghdad.
He would have known the risks, he would have known how dangerous it is to be working as a journalist in that part of the world. And I'm sure he took appropriate precautions, but the news we've had today is terrible news, and we can only hope that he's released shortly, and our sympathy and our thoughts and prayers are with his family, and we hope that he's allowed to return home very soon indeed.
In a statement, The Guardian newspaper says that Rory Carroll is missing, believed kidnapped in Iraq. We are urgently seeking information about Mr. Carroll's whereabouts and condition. More than 220 foreigners have been kidnapped by insurgents in Iraq. Both the Irish government and the British Foreign Office have called for Rory Carroll to be released unharmed. Chris Ship, ITV News.
The former Iraqi President Saddam Hussein stood in the dock of a court in Baghdad, defiantly challenging the judge and refusing even to give his name. With 7 co-defendants, he's charged with several counts of murder and torture. Paul Davis reports.
Once he held power of life or death over millions of his people. Today, Saddam Hussein was led into the metal pen that is the dock of Iraq's special tribunal to face charges of crimes against humanity. A smiling aside to one of his co-accused, the first sign of defiance, and there was much more to come. As clutching the Quran, he stood to hear and ignore the first question from the presiding judge.
What's your name? Full name.
The former dictator attempted to quote from the Quran. The judge interrupted him.
Right now we just need to register your name. Give me your ID.
Again and again Saddam refuses. He even jokes with the judge.
You know me. You are an Iraqi and you know me, unless you are not proud of knowing me.
Then he announces that he does not recognize the legality of the court.
I do not respond to this so-called court, and I retain my constitutional right as president of Iraq.
Sit down, said the judge, as he moved on to the other accused brought before this special court. The chief judge in this trial is Rizqa Mohammed Amin, an ethnic Kurd. Alongside Saddam in the dock sits Taha Yassin Ramadan, Saddam's vice president for 12 years. Baza al-Tikriti, Saddam's half-brother, former head of the feared intelligence service. And Awad al-Bandar, a former judge who under Saddam sentenced hundreds of people to death. Linking them all are accusations of mass murder and a little-known Iraqi village called Dujail, where in 1982 gunmen tried to assassinate the visiting President Saddam Hussein. In revenge, it's claimed 142 of the village men were executed and hundreds tortured. Saddam himself is seen in these pictures personally questioning suspects. He will have to answer for bigger, more notorious atrocities. But the prosecution has opened with the Dujail killings because they say they're comparatively easy to link with the deposed tyrant. Today, the charges were put to him.
Mr. Saddam, guilty or innocent?
I have said what I have said. I am not guilty.
In the village of Dujail, largely unheard of outside Iraq before this trial, relatives today carried pictures of fathers and sons who were murdered and called for the execution of Saddam. If found guilty, he could indeed face the death penalty. But the trial's already been adjourned for a month, and the judge says many key witnesses are too scared to testify against him. Paul Davis, ITV News.
NBC's Richard Engel was in the court. Earlier, I asked him about the atmosphere at the start of the trial.
Among the journalists, there was a lot of excitement. There was a sense we were covering something historic in that courtroom. For a lot of us here who've been in Baghdad for a long time, it was amazing to see Saddam Hussein finally on trial. I personally came to Iraq before the war began, watched the American and British troops arrive here in country, and then saw when Saddam was captured, went into his hole, and then it finally felt like events had culminated with this trial itself. It's going to be a long and complicated trial. It was already quite disorganized today, and so there was a lot of frustration among the reporters who were in this very fortified courtroom. We underwent rigorous security checks. A lot of people had to go through eye scans and intrusive background interviews, particularly for non-American reporters. So there were frustrations, but a sense that it was an exciting moment nonetheless.
And the trial was adjourned because many of the witnesses were too scared to turn up. What does that tell us about how it's going to proceed?
The trial was adjourned for several reasons. The defense put forward several motions. One, to see more documents. They want more time to prepare this case. And then the judge also mentioned this problem with witnesses being afraid to openly testify. This is just one of many problems that are facing this court. In the courtroom itself, there is a closed area where witnesses will be allowed to testify behind a curtain so that their identities can be kept secret. But people here don't trust this process entirely. They're afraid, as has happened so many times with Iraqi police and with the Iraqi security forces in general. Senior commanders, anyone who cooperates with this government or with the American troops here, has often been accused of being a collaborator and been executed.
Richard Engel in Baghdad, many thanks. Now, the Manchester United player Cristiano Ronaldo has been released on bail after being arrested on suspicion of rape. He was driven away from the police station near Old Trafford, where he'd been held for questioning for much of the day. He insists he's innocent. More now on that, and Garen Vincent sent this for us from Manchester.
Well, Cristiano Ronaldo now on police bail after facing questions here all day from police officers investigating an allegation that he committed a serious sexual assault on a woman in the penthouse suite of the Sanderson Hotel in London in the early hours of October the 2nd, I should say. Cristiano Ronaldo, one of the most naturally gifted players in the Manchester United squad, just 20 years old, been capped 18 times for his country. Manchester United paid a little over £12 million for him 2 years ago, and since then he has become one of the club's biggest stars. Now, there has been a rash of this kind of allegations made against a number of Premiership players in recent years. Very few of them have turned out to have any foundation. For his part, Cristiano Ronaldo has told detectives here that he is completely innocent of the allegations against him.
These are the latest satellite pictures of Hurricane Wilma, which has become the most intense Atlantic storm ever recorded. The Category 5 hurricane is heading towards Cuba and is then expected to turn towards Florida, making landfall there at the weekend. This is how our colleagues at NBC News in America are covering the latest hurricane threat.
From NBC News World Headquarters in New York, this is NBC Nightly News with Brian Williams.
Good evening. When most Americans turned in for the night last night, if they'd heard of it at all they had heard about Hurricane Wilma was that it was a Category 2 storm, perhaps, and still very far away. And America woke up this morning to that familiar and foreboding term, Category 5. Wilma passed over some very warm water overnight and is now raging tonight. And over its brief lifetime, it's predicted to do quite a bit of damage. The storm is currently southeast of Mexico's Yucatan Peninsula, Presently, Wilma is a Category 5. That's the highest there is, and it already is in the record books. The pressure at the core set a new record overnight, the most intense Atlantic hurricane ever recorded. It will weaken before making a predicted landfall in Florida at some point over the weekend. But we begin here tonight with yet another Atlantic monster. And for more, we are joined by meteorologist Bill Cairns of our digital cable weather channel, NBC Weather Plus. And Bill, here we go again.
Oh, good evening, Brian. It's unbelievable. Another Category 5 storm just as strong as Rita and Katrina. The storm rapidly intensified last night, and you can watch this black line. That's kind of where the center of the eye has been following, more or less a northwesterly motion, and it looks like it's heading, unfortunately, towards the Mexican peninsula here, the Yucatan, all the way up towards Cancun over the next couple of days. The forecast has been changing, and it keeps changing. Each of these squiggly lines earlier today took the storm just off the Yucatan towards Florida. We've had some changes. Two of our computer models are now stalling it out over the Yucatan and then drifting it towards Cuba. So the uncertainty of the forecast definitely heading for Florida this weekend is not as sure as it was earlier today. The Hurricane Center is very sure that it looks like the storm is going to remain a 4 or a 5, and there could be catastrophic damage for areas like Cancun, anywhere on the coast of Mexico. After this is where we have the question marks. One scenario has it going up the East Coast, possibly close to the Outer Banks of North Carolina and New England. Right now, it looks like the Hurricane Center is thinking this is going to go through South Florida and then out into the open Atlantic. This forecast, count on it, it will change as we go throughout the next 24 to 48 hours. We'll give you the latest when we get it in.
And we'll keep checking back with you, Bill. Thanks for that. Bill Cairns at the weather map for us tonight. And now to this latest chapter in this strange and violent storm season. And while it does seem hard to believe, preparations are indeed underway again tonight for a major storm. Here is NBC's Tom Costello.
From Sarasota to Miami and the Keys, Florida is stocking up, gassing up.
I'm pretty scared. I think it's going to come through here, and I don't want to be without gas.
And battening down.
It's better to be safe than sorry.
A race to prepare for a monster named Wilma.
This thing exploded overnight. The bottom dropped out of it.
Never before has a storm intensified so quickly, feeding off extraordinarily warm 85-degree ocean water and the absence of strong winds above that could slow it down, already lashing parts of the Caribbean.
I've been in a hurricane before, and I don't want to be in another one.
The question now, will it turn toward Florida?
This is one of the more perplexing storms we've had to deal with this year, but the good news here, this does seem to buy us a little more time.
Already, evacuations have started in the Florida Keys, and outside Miami today, they were draining the canals to prepare for a storm surge that could be 30 feet high. While on Capitol Hill, Governor Jeb Bush said Florida has pre-positioned supplies and is prepared for all kinds of contingencies.
We have pet shelters now because we heard from our citizens that they weren't leaving unless there was a place to take their beloved pet as well.
Back in Sarasota,
we'll be pulling out tomorrow or the next day if they say so.
A storm experts say is as unpredictable as it is dangerous. Tom Costello, NBC News, Washington.
NBC News' coverage of Hurricane Wilma there. Now, within the last few minutes, Thailand has revealed that another person there has died from bird flu. It brings the total dead to 13. Meanwhile, here, the government has promised that everyone in the country will be vaccinated against bird flu. Our medical editor, Lawrence McGinty, reports.
Imagine what could happen if pandemic flu struck Britain. 15 million patients thronging GP surgeries. Hospital admissions up 50%, 20,000 new cases a week. 1 in 4 workers taking sick leave because of flu. Worst hit, schools, with up to half the children affected. So a vaccine is needed urgently, and the chief medical officer is asking manufacturers to produce 120 million doses pronto.
They will be able to expand their normal production capacity, take on extra staff, do all the scientific preparation work in the certainty that they will have the contract. And it will put our country near the front of the queue for pandemic flu vaccine when it comes.
Trouble is, whatever they do, it will still probably take at least 4 months. And if Britain is one of the first countries to be hit, it could all be over by the time we get a vaccine.
The basic problem is the flu virus has to be grown in a living animal. In practical terms, that means hen's eggs, and it takes time. What's more, you can't start making the vaccine until the new strain has emerged. And then, as vaccine becomes available, who gets it? Well, first in line, healthcare workers, then other essential workers like fire crews. After that, the most vulnerable medically, followed by those in closed communities like care homes, and only then to the general public. That's why the government is relying on the antiviral drug Tamiflu. This is their stockpile in a secret location for security reasons. There won't be enough until next September, but this will be our first line of defence. Lawrence McGinty, ITV News.
There's more pressure on the government today to speed up the licensing of a drug that could save the lives of thousands of breast cancer patients. Scientists in America found that Herceptin could halve the chance of the disease returning to patients with early breast cancer. James Champion has more.
For Alison Cooper from Bolton, every day is precious. As a breast cancer patient, she doesn't know how long she has left to live. But she knows treatment with Herceptin is what she desperately needs.
If I live 2 years, I'll be lucky. But if I have the Herceptin, that can greatly improve my life expectancy to 10 years or even maybe forever.
The research published today involved more than 5,000 patients in 39 countries and found that Herceptin could prevent half of all breast tumours from reappearing in early cancer patients. Currently, the drug is only licensed for use in advanced breast cancer, although doctors can use their discretion to prescribe it in other exceptional circumstances. Cases like that of Barbara Clark, the nurse who won a legal battle with her local health authority to get the drug. That forced the government to promise that all women diagnosed with early-stage breast cancer would be tested to see if they're suitable for treatment with Herceptin.
And I was horrified by the length of time that the licensing and the evaluation was going to take. And that's why I've intervened in this. I'm urging Roche, the manufacturers, to get their clinical data as quickly as possible and get it into the licensing authorities. But I've also agreed with NICE that we'll speed up the evaluation.
The major fly in this particular ointment, Herceptin's not likely to get a license for use with early breast cancer patients until next year. Campaigners have repeated their concerns about the length of time it takes for potentially life-saving drugs like these to become widely available across the NHS. And of course, time is one thing Alison Cooper and thousands of others like her don't have. James Champion, ITV News.
You can have your say on that story today. The ITV News channel wants to know, should Herceptin be made available for all? If you think yes, text Y to 63338. But if you think no, text N to the same number, 63338. You can influence that result. Text costs 25 pence plus whatever your phone company charge you to send a text. Now for a look at this morning's front pages, starting with the Daily Telegraph, and they feature a picture there of Saddam Hussein, deposed leader of Iraq, from the first day of his trial, and the Tory leadership race also dominating. Cameron 59%, Fox 18%, Davis 15%. The results from a YouGov poll confirming David Cameron's meteoric rise as the favourite in that leadership contest. A look at the Independent, and they too carry scenes from that trial of Saddam Hussein. The headline, "The Caged Dictator." A look at The Guardian, and same story dominating, and a quote, "I am the president of Iraq. I do not recognise this court." But also to the side there, very worrying story that Guardian journalist abducted in Baghdad. So we brought you here this morning of the kidnapping, the abduction of Rory Carroll. A look at The Times, and Saddam featured there, and wonder drug is cure for breast cancer, says doctors. That's all we've also brought you here on our morning news show about the drug Herceptin and its incredible results for women diagnosed with early breast cancer. And on the Daily Mirror, Ronaldo arrested for rape. The Manchester United player out on bail after he was arrested yesterday on suspicion of rape. Let's have a look at the sport now. And they already look unbeatable in the Premiership. And last night, Chelsea served a warning that they will be just as difficult to overcome in the Champions League. Jose Mourinho's side were in sublime mood against Real Betis. A 4-0 win justifying their tag as tournament favourites. Here's Richard Pallow.
While Chelsea had dominated domestically, so far they'd stuttered in Europe. this was the night they finally hit top gear. Didier Drogba's good early season form continued. He grabbed the opener. And when in this form, Chelsea don't need any help, but the Betis keeper gave them their second, Ricardo Carvalho pouncing from close range. Now remember, Real Betis are a well-respected La Liga side, but Chelsea were simply leagues apart, Joe Cole curling in a sublime third. And then, as if to illustrate Chelsea's awesome strength in depth, the second choice pairing of Sean Wright-Phillips and Hernan Crespo combined to make it 4-0. No surprise then to see Jose Mourinho smiling, and no doubt the other clubs will now begin worrying how to stop the Chelsea juggernaut. Richard Pallow, ITV News.
To the city now, let's have a look at the markets. And the FTSE closed down 96.1 points at 5,167.8. The Dow Jones finished up at 128.9 and is at 10,414. The Nikkei is up 74.8 points at 13,204. The pound against the dollar, you see there, 1.76. This is the ITV Morning News. A look now at the main news so far today. David Cameron goes into the second ballot of Tory MPs today as the overwhelming favourite to succeed Michael Howard. The Shadow Education Secretary is widely expected to pick up the bulk of Kenneth Clarke's votes. Jane Dougal has the latest from Westminster.
If the figures are anything to go by, they could spell the future of the Tory party. David Cameron is almost certain to go through on today's ballot of MPs. And according to the YouGov poll in today's Telegraph, he has the largest public support, therefore predicting he would win the leadership battle hands down. Out of 700 party members polled, 59% backed David Cameron, 18% said they would vote for Liam Fox, and just 15% supported David Davis. For the former frontrunner, third place makes for tough reading. Although gaining 62 votes in the first ballot, it's thought several will change allegiance to Cameron.
I think it's very difficult when you pledge to a candidate because you think there'll be, a great Prime Minister, which is, I think, what David Davis would be. But the key thing is obviously to win an election in order to do that. And for me, the main issue, as I told him, is winning the next general election. And I just think the Cameron campaign has far outstripped that of any of the other candidates.
And now Davis is also facing competition from the dark horse in this race, Liam Fox. He needs just 11 more votes to overtake him.
I mean, there's been no sign of that at all. I mean, what I say to them, actually, is if you're a centre-right candidate, you want a centre-right candidate, you should be supporting the one who's going to win. I mean, it's 62 votes to 42. It's a pretty straightforward comparison.
I don't think anyone really understands what the true picture is. I think my colleagues are reflecting at the moment. They're looking at yesterday's result, trying to digest it.
If David Davis trails a poor second in today's ballot, pressure may be on him to stand aside. He said he wouldn't do that because he wants to continue competing in this exciting leadership race. Jane Diggle, ITV News.
And Jane is at Westminster for us. Jane, it's shaping up to be a tight finish.
Yes, it looks like it's going to be very tight indeed. And that battle seems like it's going to be for second place. Now, I'm not saying that the first place is a foregone conclusion. It's probably we're not sure if David Cameron will win or not, but it certainly looks that way at the moment. And that's because the majority of Ken Clarke's supporters have said publicly that they will back Cameron. Now, for second place, it looks like that's going to be a very tough battle between Liam Fox and David Davis. Now, that battle will be very, very tight because all that Liam Fox needs to do is to take 11 votes from David Davis. In the last few weeks, David Davis's campaign has lost a bit of momentum, and there have been rumours going around that if he comes a very poor second to David Cameron, that he may stand aside and allow Cameron to go on to become the leader. Now, he himself has said that he will not do that. However, if you remember the 2001 campaign, he did stand aside to allow Ian Duncan Smith to become leader. It's been a fascinating turnaround. Who would have said a month ago that David Cameron would have been the favourite? Voting begins at 3 o'clock this afternoon. It's scheduled to finish at 5, and we'll have the result live on the ITV News channel at 5:30.
Jane Diggle at Westminster, many thanks. That's the way the news looks this morning. We'll have continuing coverage of all today's developments on the ITV News channel. Next is GMTV, but from all of us on the Morning News team, thanks for watching.